So just wanted to welcome everybody that's here. For those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Derek Dioria. I'm the Executive Director with Walworth County Economic Development Alliance. So we're doing this a little bit different format than we normally do. Typically, we would do a 90-minute session where we would feature three different segments, but we wanted to just kind of give some good focus to each one. So we'll have three approximately 30-minute sessions with some question and answer at the end. And we're really pleased to have Kristine Hillmer here, who will be doing our first session. She's the CEO of President and CEO of the Wisconsin Restaurant Association. We'll also be doing one on September 15th, same time, 9 o'clock, half an hour. We're going to feature a retail segment, so Stan's Fit for Your Feet. It's a fourth generation local footwear retail chain. So we're excited to have their president, Jim Saget, and Megan Saget Holton, who is their marketing person. And then just learned today that we do have our third session filled too. That'll be September 29th. It's Brandon McConnell. He is the vice chair of the on the board of the Wisconsin Lodging Association, and he also works for IDM Hospitality. So excited about that. And this is a collaborative effort, like I said, between the chambers and our agency. And so it's the chambers in the county. So it's Visit Lake Geneva, it's Elkhorn Chamber, Delavan Chamber, East Troy Chamber, Whitewater Chamber, and Geneva Lake West Chamber. So those are my esteemed partners in this venture, and usually we switch off. So just a couple housekeeping things, if you can, just mute your audio, and if you want your video, if you're going to be moving around a lot, just so it's not too distracting to the others. For those of you who haven't used Zoom, if you go kind of scroll down to the bottom, you should have, or top, should pop up where you have an option to chat, and you can put a question in there during the session. And at the end, we'll have time for question and answer, where you can do that through the chat session. So with that, I don't want to spend too much more time. I want to get started. Again, really pleased to have Kristine Hillmer, President and CEO of Wisconsin Restaurant Association. We had asked her just to talk a little bit about some of the lessons she's learning about this new COVID situation and the challenges that she's seeing out in the field there. In terms of the customer service and how they're dealing with it. So really excited to hear more about it, Kristine, and I'll turn it over to you right now. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Derek, and thank you for having me this morning. As Derek mentioned, I'm Kristine Hillmer. I'm the President and CEO of the Wisconsin Restaurant Association, and here to just provide you some background and information about our membership and about what we've been doing to help our members and how our members are coping, and really some headwinds that we're seeing as we approach. So pre-crisis, the Wisconsin Restaurant Association represented almost 285,000 jobs in the state of Wisconsin, and almost 13,000 eating and drinking establishments with a $10.1 billion annual sales. That is the restaurant industry in Wisconsin. And nationally, the restaurants represent the second largest collective private employer in the country. So in our industry, because of the vastness and because it's so big, it was the hardest hit industry that was first to close down and still is struggling. In fact, there is even a state that still does not allow inside dining at any capacity. So as you can imagine, that it's been really difficult. And generally, a restaurant operates on a slim profit margin of 3 to 5%. And what that means is for every dollar that comes into a restaurant, 95 to 97 cents of it are already spoken for. So it is a very slim profit margin. And then when you take the COVID hitting and everybody has reduced capacity and they were even closed for a while, it's been a big challenge. And there really is a big hole that we have dug ourselves into trying to stay afloat. And you also have to remember that restaurants are the lifeblood of communities. It's a place where people go to find out the latest news. I have vivid memories of my dad growing up. He was a farmer, and every morning he would get up and he would go to the local restaurant to get the latest news. And it's a place where people celebrate, and it's where people come together collectively for a lot of reasons. And so it really is one of those places that we need to maintain. And then if you look broader, a lot of hospitality and you've got a lot of tourism. So when you take a look at the broader impact of all the other businesses that rely on tourism or rely on restaurants for part of their business model, really the impact is severe. So when the order came down mid-March that we need to close down restaurants, no inside dining was available and so on, it came down very quickly. It was within 12 hours, you had to close down and people had food stocks. It was right before March 17th, which is St. Patrick's Day. And so they had all these plans and parties and so on. And these major events are fun for a lot of folks, but for a restaurant, it was one of those drivers that if you don't do well on St. Patrick's Day, or you don't do well during the late Memorial Day weekend, or Easter Sunday, or whatnot, these are key marks for restaurants that they have to do very well in order to survive the other times of the year. So restaurants really pivoted very, very quickly to delivery and carry-out options. They modified their menus. They really took a look at everything they had in their business, and they shrunk as much as they can. And a lot of people did do delivery and carry-out, but it is also one of those things that not everybody was in a position to be able to do that. If you already had a robust carry-out part of your business, or you had a drive-through, you were well set up to really survive. But there's a lot of businesses, and think about a supper club, not all of them have done carry-out and delivery, and they had to pivot very quickly to figure out how to do it, what's the process internally, do we have the supplies we need, the carry-out containers, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was easy for some folks to pivot to the carry-out and delivery, but very difficult for other folks. One of the things that we did as an association is we quickly changed our business model internally to really not only help our members, but really help our industry as a whole. And it didn't matter if you were a member or not. We knew that we needed to help the industry survive. We refocused our staff to outbound calls, inbound calls, reaching as many people as we can, plus a very robust government affairs strategy so that we could talk with local officials, state officials, and we are also working with the National Restaurant Association nationally. Because as we know, we need some of the federal dollars to come down. It did with some of the PPP, although problematic, it really helped at least sustain a lot of businesses. And then to the state level on some of what they were doing, and then local level especially has become important now because of the local health departments and making sure that they are doing things in a way that allows restaurants in a way that's safe for their employees and safe for their customers. On our website, we also pivoted very quickly to providing as much information we could so it was available 24/7. We have a number of different sections on our website, and they were geared towards restaurant operators. They were geared towards employees so that they can help navigate unemployment or questions they were having, as well as restaurants that remained open at that time for delivery or carry out. And some of them just outright closed. They couldn't do that piece of it, as well as a really fun piece is what's good in the neighborhood. One of the things that I know through doing this is anytime there's a crisis, the good in people come out, the good in restaurants come out. And a lot of restaurants pivoted to helping out their community. They did lunches for school kids. They took all, if they were going to be closing down, they took all of their product that was going to not or was going to go bad, and they pivoted to making meal kits or doing things for their staff. So there's a lot of really cool things that have been happening. So as we know, early May, we had the Palm decision. That's a Supreme Court decision that basically said that the governor could no longer keep his safer at home order past the 60 days, because in that 60-day time frame, it was his responsibility and the legislature's responsibility to come together and figure out how to move forward. Not going to get into the politics of it. There's lots of reasons why it didn't happen, and I think there could be fault on both ends. But what it did is it caused a great amount of confusion to restaurant operators, and really any businesses for that matter, because, well, what does this mean for me? Okay, you closed us down, but now public health departments could be doing their plans. So that Wisconsin's been really a bit of a different story than nationally, because we know that each local public health department are doing their plans and so on, versus in other states, the governor and the state legislature are the ones doing things, and so it's a little different. So now we're seeing a little bit of a hodgepodge. We know that Dane County and Madison and Milwaukee are the city of Milwaukee, not the county, the city. They have their own plans and they're pretty locked down. And perhaps that makes sense because they are more demographically dense. But you have other counties like Walworth or Brown County or whatever, that they're doing things a little bit differently. So if you're an operator and single in a particular community, you're pretty much good, you know what's going on. If you have multiple locations and they're in different counties, it becomes much more difficult because there's not a consistency across the board. One of the things that we have been discovering through a number of the public health departments is it appears that, at least at this point, what we're seeing in the hot spots and in Wisconsin specifically is the spread is not tied to restaurants. Right now, it seems that anybody who is asymptomatic and ill and they're coming into restaurants either as an employee or as a customer, and that's how it's coming in, but it's not being spread at restaurants. And we're starting to get the data that is proving that. And people have lives outside of their job, and I'm not gonna, upset any employees, but they do have jobs and they do have families and do have other things outside of the restaurant. And so that's where the exposure is happening. Over the 4th of July weekend, I know that a lot of spread was happening at family parties. In fact, I was exposed at a family party myself. The rest of us there was no spread beyond that one person, but it was where people were coming and gathering and so on. And so it still is important to be cautious in what you're doing. But at least for restaurants, we do know that at least it appears that the spread is not tied to there. So let's pivot a little bit to talking a little bit about the future. So we have difficulties ahead of us. And that's where I want to spend the rest of my time. And before I talk about the difficulties, though, I want to, just imagine, what would your communities be in a world without restaurants? It impacts Main Street. It has that ripple effect to everybody in your community, to other businesses and so on, to all the food suppliers and so on. And that's what we're facing, a potential world without restaurants. We are, and right now it's conservative statewide, we are estimating that 30% of restaurants will not survive this. And there's a number of reasons why. In areas that are locked down more or more demographically dense, that could be higher. Because as I mentioned earlier in the call, restaurants operate in general on a very thin profit margin at 3 to 5%. And so 95 to 97 cents of every dollar already spoken for in terms of your overhead, your staffing, your electricity, your rent, your mortgage, whatever it is, product costs. And so that 3 to 5%, that's what's keeping restaurants afloat, and that's in a normal time. Well, now where you have reduced capacity, then you had a couple months where you were probably closed down, or your sales were 70 to 95% below where they normally were. You've dug yourself in a hole, and trying to build that on that kind of a slim profit margin when you can't be open to full capacity really becomes problematic. And then born and raised in Wisconsin. I love Wisconsin. I love being here, but we know the winters can be a bit challenging. We know that it gets cold. We know that the weather gets ugly. And right now, a lot of restaurants are surviving because they have outside dining. That's how they're filling some of the gap they're seeing in their restaurant. They're doing inside and outside dining. Well, it's going to be in a couple months that outside dining option is going to be closed to them. So that's pivoting to some of the difficulties ahead that we're seeing. Not only is it that the outside dining is going to be closed to us, but there's continued uncertainty on when things could potentially get back to normal. And I'll say normal in air quotes because I don't know what normal is going to be. And so restaurant operators are going to have to start making some really hard decisions. A lot of them have gone into debt. A lot of them have tried to pivot as best they can. But if they can't return to having full dining rooms and really having a robust business, we again are facing a world without a lot of our favorite restaurants. We also know that through this pandemic that consumers' habits are changing. There are a lot of folks that do not feel comfortable eating out in a restaurant at all. Don't blame them. There's very solid reasons for them to feel that. I myself, I feel very comfortable going out at restaurants and I am visiting them as much as possible. But because consumers' habits are changing, it's going to be hard to have them pivot back to what we want as normal or back in the day, which was probably 7 months ago. But especially in areas where you have to drive or it's a destination, a lot of people are choosing to stay much more hyper local. We also know that restaurants have gone through any cash or any savings that they have on board. They're maxing out their credit. The PPP was a lifeline to a lot of restaurants. Not a perfect product. Certainly there were some issues with it, but it really did become a lifeline. And now restaurants are making sure that they can make that a forgivable grant versus a loan, because of course, if it's a loan, then they're taking on additional debt. And they also have burned through most of it. I know the restaurants have, or most folks have through the end of the year now to use that money, but a lot of folks that were early adopters, they had to use it within 8 weeks. And so now they're operating without those PPP funds. And then we also know that unemployment, a lot of the people that remain on unemployment are from our industry, and or they were some of the first laid off, and some of them still have not gotten their unemployment. So owners are also worried about their staff. They're worried that their staff may, and then now with a lot of schools going virtual, how can they work, provide for their family? Unemployment is now dropped down because we don't have the federal dollars, but yet they need to work, but their kids are home and they're trying to do learning. So it's a very difficult situation. And this is not unique to restaurants, I get that, but it just happens to be the space I know. Another difficulty has had is we just don't know what Congress is going to do. We don't know if they're going to do further relief on the PPP. We don't know if there is going to be any additional unemployment funds. I know that there was an executive order, they gave $300 and then the state was supposed to do a match. However, the problem with this is states have to accept it and Wisconsin has not, but the pot of money is actually relatively small. The estimate is the few states that have adopted it and starting to use it, it may only last a month. And so we're already late in the game. So even if we wanted to use any of those executive order dollars for unemployment, it may not last very long as well. And then we also don't know, there's other things that Congress needs to worry about, and that's tax credits and loan forgiveness. And then for the PPP, there's some potential tax liability that could be coming out, that if you use some of these dollars for some of your overhead and so on, there could be a tax liability that could be coming down because then you can't deduct those kind of expenses off of your taxes. And so there's some huge concerns that there are operators that are going to end up with this huge tax bill, and that's going to close even more. And then of course we know that winter is coming, and I already spoke about that. And then we also have then the final difficulty or uncertainty of really, is there going to be another wave of closings? Is there going to be more decreased capacity as we go into the fall and the winter because we have a spike in cases and people aren't outside as much? So I know we're starting to run out of time and we want Q&A, but what can you do to support restaurants? Continue to eat out. It is safe. And what we're telling operators is it's really important as a restaurateur that you tell people and hyper communicate all the safety protocols that you have in place. Do you require your staff to wear masks? Well, we do know there's a mask mandate, but there's some enforcement issues and so on. But it is a good idea to hyper communicate what you're doing internally, how you're cleaning and so on, and then demonstrate that as people are in your restaurants. My plea though is there is a second component to the safety stuff, and that's the consumer. The consumer needs to understand the restaurants, they've done everything in their power to be as safe as they possibly can for themselves, for their staff, as well as for their customers. And so we need to make sure that, let's see, I see a sign coming up. And we need people to understand and follow the protocols that the restaurants have put in place. I think that is just as important because there's two elements of it. And it doesn't matter what your politics are, it doesn't matter what your personal feelings are. If a restaurant has set in place certain protocols and you choose to go dine there, please follow them. And if you don't want to follow them, that's perfectly your choice, but then don't go to that restaurant. I've just outlined the brutal nature and the impact of this on restaurants. And if you choose to then question everything that they're doing, they have been through the ringer. And a lot of times you're also complaining to frontline staff who may be a high school kid or a college kid who's just there for the summer and now is going to be returning to school, or a mom who's a single mom with kids at home, that this is her job, that this is how she's feeding her kids. They're not the ones to be arguing with. So kindness goes a long way, understanding, visiting websites to make sure you understand the protocols. And if you don't feel they're comfortable for you, then you have a choice not to go there. And if you choose not to go there, then you can always choose the carry out, the delivery options, and so on. Kindness will go a long way. Supporting your local restaurants in any way that you can is huge. And then my final point on how you can support restaurants, and this is my personal soapbox because I know that the opposite side of it is when you do delivery, my plea is that you contact the restaurant on how to get that food delivered to you. And there's a number of reasons why. First, they may have brought some staff back and using them as their delivery drivers so that they are keeping a job. The second thing is third-party delivery apps sometimes don't have a relationship with that restaurant. And so when that happens, they'll grab an old manual, they'll throw it on their website. It might be old menu pricing. It might be things that they don't make currently and they don't have the product for. And so if you do your takeout or your delivery through a third-party app, you're not necessarily getting the current status of the restaurant. Now, there are some that have relationships, but by calling the restaurant, you get that from them. They'll tell you how to best get their food and so on. The other thing is by calling the restaurant directly, they are in the driver's delivery method so that your food is safe and it's hot and it's affordable. Some of these third-party apps, if it's done through them, so much of the dollars go to them that the restaurant gets so little that sometimes it doesn't even pay for the food cost and the employee cost to prepare it. So that's a little bit of my personal soapbox. Do it directly through the restaurant. Don't do it through a third-party app. I'm not saying delivery is bad. That's not what I'm saying. But if a restaurant has a relationship with that third party, fantastic. That puts the restaurant in the driver's seat in order to help get you your food safely and in an economic way. So I know we're at 9:28, and I'm sure there's a couple of questions, but there is, but I just went through a lot of stuff, so happy to open it up, and I don't really see any questions on the chat, but happy to take any if you wanted to unmute yourself.
All right, great. Yeah, thank you, Kristine. I'm going to just put up this slide here too, if you don't mind, where it just has your contact information too.
Yeah.
But let me just see too if I can see any questions at the moment too, because you're able to see that as well, right, Kristine?
I can see that, yes. And the other thing that if you have within your areas restaurants that have questions, you can get the phone number on our website. We have it's called the SWRA Hotline, and we will take questions, and we have for 20 or 30 years. If operators have questions, whether it's on their operations, on safety plans, on HR issues, and so on, we have a hotline team that collectively, they have more than 75 years collective experience, either answering these questions or in the business. And so we have resources that for whatever question they have, if we don't have the answer, which we probably do, we have resources that we can find it. So we want to help restaurants be as successful as possible. And that really is truly our mission. It's right in our mission statement. It's to help the restaurant and food service industry be successful. And so our SWRA hotline is where any operator can call and they can answer questions. Now, especially if they're a member, we will go above and beyond, and we'll find more resources and so on. But any restaurant, we are happy to help them out.
Derek, I do have a question for Kristine.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I apologize for hopping on late. I'm the one who held up the sign that I had no power at home.
Oh no.
So I had a restaurant operator come to me very frustrated with, and I know this is singly a staffing issue for him, but I wasn't sure how to help him or answer him. Is he had a high school student test positive that hadn't been in his restaurant for in excess of 7 days, but he was like, I don't think some of these young people know where to go if they've tested or if they're being tested, or whose responsibility it is, whether it's their parents, that happen to be part of the cross-country team. So if the school should have made notice, and I just blatantly said, you know, we're in a small town, it's going to get out that you had someone. You need to make a public statement that he hasn't worked in 7 days, and whether I just said, close early one night and say we're doing a deep clean and not open till noon the next day. I think that public perception is what needs to be done. Is there a protocol that should be done? Is there something that you would like to be seen? I would love to send that out.
Yep. So Chris, thank you for that question. That's probably the most common question we have. And one thing that we are telling operators, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you are going to have a case in your operations. And I think that that's whether it's a restaurant, hotel, retail, anywhere, I think all businesses are going to be facing this. And so a couple of things. First of all, you said one key thing in this particular case, that employee had not been at the business for 7 days. So, you know, I know they're doing quarantining for 14 days, but they have some places have brought that back to 10 days. The fact that they really hadn't been in, it is very, very slim that there was any exposure whatsoever. First of all. Second of all, an exposure is 15 minutes or more of close contact. And that's why that 6-foot distancing is so critical. So if you've got 2 staff people working closely together and it's, you know, they're just in passing, the potential of spread is actually very low. It's minuscule, but it's not or it's not impossible, but it's still there. I think you're absolutely spot on. And this is the other thing that we are telling operators. It is better to be honest, open, and transparent. And all right, we had a staff person, we had a customer, whomever it is, that was at our site and this is anybody who had a direct exposure, we're having them stay home, we're hyper cleaning, and then we're opening up. That's absolutely appropriate. And I think it's really important for people to be transparent about it. The last thing you want to do is try to hide it. And then it comes out in the media or the grapevine, local community grapevines gets going. That's going to be the worst case scenario. So I think being open and honest about it is the best way to go. Because then if somebody was at your facility at the time that that exposure happened, then they can make some personal choices on whether or not they need to self-quarantine. Maybe they have a parent. I have an 82-year-old mom who has an autoimmune disorder. So if I were exposed, I would probably stay away from her for a little bit. Or if they had symptoms, and then they can get themselves tested and so on. So I think it's always best to be as open, honest, and transparent, not only in what you're doing, but if there's an exposure. And again, it's not if, it's a matter of when. So I think what you told them and the guidance was spot on.
Okay. Derek, I do have another question. I was asked if there's another testing date coming up here in Walworth County or not.
You know, Chris, I know that I don't know exactly. We'll check that out, but I do know that Walworth County has been very active in either requesting, you know, sites in the county or working with a neighboring county.
Right.
And so I'm pretty sure if we get on the Walworth County site, we'll see where okay. Typically there's something within a, you know, hour drive or less if it's not in the county.
Yeah.
We can get that out to the group.
Okay, Derek, thank you. Thank you, Kristine, for your answer.
Oh, my pleasure. And you can also, on our website, which is SWRA you can also find, there's for restaurant operators, you can find if you have a case, what you should do, our guidance is, all those documents is on our website. So you can go ahead and look there.
That's great. I do have one, Kristine, for you, but I'm just curious if anybody else, I suppose it might be easiest just to unmute if you do have a question for Kristine. So Kristine, one of the things it was, you know, kind of an eye opener there. I know that restaurants work on a tight margin, but I guess I didn't realize that it's potentially 3 to 5 cents out of every dollar. That's pretty amazing that they can even do that. Question to you, are you seeing people people being restaurant owners or restaurants, putting surcharges on, raising prices at all? And if not, should more of them be doing that?
Well, so it's a really difficult conversation and concept for restaurateurs to do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, Wisconsinites, and I am a proud Wisconsin born and raised gal, Wisconsinites are frugal. And so, and I won't say cheap, we're frugal. So we're careful with our money. And so, especially when you're dining out, those are disposable dollars. So there's definitely a price sensitivity there that that folks may not then come back. And how many times you see, oh, I can get a burger for $5 here. Oh no, I can get a burger for $4.95 over here. So I'm going to go over to this other place. So there's that price sensitivity. The other thing, and this is really particularly in your smaller communities, if your base is more of an older population, a lot of them are on fixed income. And so you're going to price yourself out of their market as well. And for some of these seniors, especially who go out to eat for their breakfast and lunch, this is their social life. This is their way to get out and see their friends and get a hot meal and so on. And if you're pricing them out of the market, you're also pricing a big cultural thing out of your community.
Sorry about that.
No.
The, let's see. Sorry. Sorry about that. No, that's helpful to know, because I think, that seems like, oh, that could be a logical thing, but that could certainly backfire.
Absolutely.
Just one other question I have too. I don't know if anybody has another question they want to jump in before I ask that. Is there one thing, Kristine, that you could say based on the fact that their overhead is so high, if they're trying to survive? I mean, is there one thing you could say, okay, do this or whatever, it'll drastically cut your overhead, but you'll still be able to, serve X amount or whatever? Maybe there's not. I don't know. I'm just curious what you've seen.
There really is not, because if there was a magic bullet, they'd already be doing it. But you have to remember that, and this is all hospitality, it's not just restaurants, it's a service industry. So it's all about the connecting, and it's the service, and it's about the people. It's not always just about the product. And so, and that's one of the things that I love about Wisconsin is the hospitality heart that we have, and wanting to help people and make them happy, and that service. But because of that, it's a very staff intensive operation, which if you're going to save dollars, then that means a lot of times cutting staff. And so, and if they could do it on a reduced staff, they'd already be doing it, especially now. So there really are no magic bullets. But I encourage everybody to either go out to eat physically or to do the carry out and delivery. That's how we are going to actually help our restaurants survive and be there when we come out of this pandemic.
Well, and I think, Kristine, that is a really good point, though, even though it's not necessarily a magic bullet. But, one thing that the restaurant owners can do is, like you said, really, if they, I don't want to say ratchet up, because I'm sure a lot of them already have a high level of customer service. But if there are ways to, enhance that experience, that customer experience even more while they've got the people there, then maybe that's part of a magic bullet or whatever, just to really work hard to do that. So
absolutely, and do it without spreading the virus, because that will kill a business if there's an outbreak and there's said to be spread to multiple people. And again, we haven't really seen that, but that could really kill a business, because that would almost make it unrecoverable.
Great. Well, Kristine, really, this was, I thought, very helpful, and really appreciate your time and willingness to offer resources like you've been doing to members and non-members. So, we'll definitely get this out to a much larger group that we're all a part of, our respective members and people that we work with. So really appreciate you doing that and all the work that you're doing and taking time for us today. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. And if anybody has any questions, you have my email. You can email me directly, or again, tons of resources on our website, wirestaurant.org. And that's where you can find the hotline number, as well as all sorts of resources. There's a robust area on just COVID, but other things there as well for anybody who needs help. Happy to do it. Thank you for having me.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you again. And thanks everybody for joining.